Now that we're done with the concept of the total and marginal utility, we are ready to talk about what we call equimarginal principle. Equimarginal principle is a principle that will help us derive an individual consumer's demand curve. Before we talk about the equimarginal principle, I would like to talk about the goal of an individual consumer. We believe if you are a rational consumer, you will want to maximize your total utility from your given income. Now that we have limited income, let's say for example my income is $1,000, I would like to make sure however I spend this money, I must get the maximum possible satisfaction. In reality, however, we are unable to measure utility. But if marginal utility were measured in terms of money, one could argue then the MU curve would become the person's demand curve. So let's assume that this is the MU of an individual. Now, on my x-axis I have quantity, on my y-axis I have MU comma price, and there's a reason why I wrote price here. But let's assume you are planning to buy Q star quantity. For the Q star quantity, let's say the MU in terms of, let's say, dollar terms is, for example, 5. Now, if the MU is $5 for this quantity Q star, then this would mean this is the price I will be willing to pay. Why? Because the value I place on this quantity is $5. If the price is greater than MU or $5, then one would argue this you would not buy this good because the price is higher than the value you place or the marginal utility you place on the good. But if the price is less than marginal utility, then we would definitely buy this good because the value we place on the good is more than the price of the good. We can also notice that if the price is equal to $5, then all the points till Q star, we can argue this that the marginal utility is greater than price. Why? Because the marginal utility, which is shown by all these points on the blue line, are more than the price of $5. So as long as MU is greater than or equal to price, the consumer will keep on buying the good. So till point A, we'll keep on buying the good, which means this MU curve is showing us what we are willing to pay, or in other words, it is showing us our demand curve. That's why we argue this, that demand curve is our MU curve if MU is measured in money, because that is telling us that each and every point on the MU curve is simply the price we are willing to pay. If the price is more than MU, we will not buy the good. But if the price is less than marginal utility, we will keep on buying the good. In fact, we should stop if the price is $5. We should stop here because beyond this, MU is lower than $5. So, for example, if you want to buy, for example, this quantity Q dash, the only way you can buy this is when the price goes down to something like point B, where MU might be, let's say, $3, and the price has to also fall to, let's say, $3. If the price is stuck at $5, we may never want to buy this good because the MU is lower than the price, which is $5. So one could argue this, that the marginal benefit of buying a good is simply your marginal utility, while the price that we pay is the marginal cost of the consumption that we take. So we say price is our marginal cost or the extra cost of consumption. And as long as MU is greater than or equal to price, we will buy this good. Now, the only problem with this analysis so far is we are only discussing a one good analysis. In order for us to have a more meaningful analysis, we need to look at what we call our equimarginal principle, which looks at more than one good, because whenever a consumer is looking at maximizing his total utility from a given budget, he's not only spending on one good, he looks at more than one goods, and that's where our equimarginal principle becomes more relevant. According to the Equi-marginal principle, a consumer will maximize his total utility from a given budget or income when the marginal utility from good A over price of good A is equal to marginal utility of good B over price of good B, given he is, let's say, thinking of buying two goods, good A and good B, from his limited budget. Now, why is that the case, that the marginal utility to price ratio has to be equal for both these goods? Let's look at it through an example. Let's say I have two goods, good A and good B. The MU for good A is, let's say, 30, while the MU for good B is, let's say, 10. Now, clearly, if I don't know the prices of these goods, you will always say that good A is preferred to good B because it gives you more MU than good B, and MU is the extra satisfaction, right? But what if at the same time I tell you that the price of good A is, for example, $15, while the price for good B is, for example, $2. So while good A is definitely preferred over good B because it has a higher MU, but it's also very expensive. It is $15 per unit versus good B is only $2. So a better way to look at things will be to look at marginal utility per dollar spent, because that can help us compare prices with the MU of both these goods. So if I look at MU per dollar for good A, that is 2, while MU for per dollar for B is 5. So clearly I can say this, that MUB over price of B is greater than MUA over price of A, as per dollar I get more from good B than from good A. Now, in this scenario, when good B is clearly giving you higher utility per dollar spent, then the person would buy more of good B and less of good A. So we should increase the quantity of B from our budget and decrease the quantity of A. But we also know this, when we decide to buy more of a good, the marginal utility for good B will start to fall. Why? Because of the law of diminishing marginal utility, which simply says this, that as we buy more of a good, the MU will fall for a good. But because we're buying less of good A, the MU of good A will start to rise. In other words, left hand side will start to fall and right hand side will start to rise. And we will keep on buying more of B and less of A till there may come a point where we will realize that the MU of B over price of B has become equal to MU of A over price of A. At this point, the rational consumer will have no incentive to change or buy more or less of any good, because the equimarginal principle is met and the consumer equilibrium is reached. This framework of equimarginal principle is more useful than the discussion that we had earlier when we were looking at only one product, is because now we can have multiple products. So if we have multiple products in the budget, one could argue this, that the consumer can maximize his utility from a given budget when, let's say, MUA over price of A, where A is product A, is equal to MUB over price of B, is equal to any MU of good N over price of N. In other words, if a consumer wants to maximize his utility, he will make sure that the amount of satisfaction or utility gain from the last unit of money or dollar spent on each product, be it A, B, or N, must be the same. If it's not the same, then he will reallocate resources between goods in order to make sure he maximizes his total utility.